an invitation to a bar mitzvah of Ludwig Lewison. I didn't know what town it came from. I knew he was German. I didn't know what town it came from. Things like that. Absolutely. So that's what we did, and that was my job. That was my job, and I was continuing with it until I said, "Look, it's not for me. You need a bibliographer. You need a librarian." I never studied librarianship. I'm not a librarian. I am not a bibliographer. I'm pretty good for a substitute because when I read something, I know what I read. I can read Hebrew, and I can read Yiddish, and I can read Spanish, and I can read Russian and Ukrainian, so I can tell you what's there. But we can't do it. It'll take years, and it did. It'll take years to do it. And that's why Nappen was at a loss when I said, "Look, I want to go home." No wonder that they was at a loss, but I said, you have to at least you have someone to guide you and do it. So they got finally Rifkind, and they organized it. And you see, as soon as I came back, I went to see a very famous woman, Hannah Arendt. Hannah Arendt was at that time working for the American Jewish Congress. So I thought I'll go to see her. She was a very strange woman, a very difficult woman. But anyway, I went to say it. I wanted to tell her. So she listened, she understood, she knew what it was. I said, "Look, the only thing I can do is to try to organize a committee right now." And she got in touch with Baron, which made sense. Baron was the historian at Columbia, and a great historian. And they organized the committee, what to do, and little by little, a lot of these Sifrei Torah were brought here, and a lot of I was in a synagogue recently where was I in a synagogue recently? For a bat mitzvah, somewhere in Long Island, and I see a Sefer Torah. I say, one of these Sifrei Torah they got one of those Sifrei Torah.
What happened to the rest of the collection of books and other...
Wherever possible, I'll tell you just briefly.
Okay.
Briefly. Wherever possible, it was returned to the proper owners, where ownership could be established, like the Rosentaliana. Or another one that I can mention, that I know of. Is it all right? There's a famous Jewish family in Italy, the Luzzatu family, dating back to God knows when. One was a prime minister, one was a Kabbalist, one was a very fine biblical scholar, one was a poet. The biblical scholar was also a book collector. His name was Shmuel David Luzzatu. Now this Luzzatu collected books all his life, and it was known as the Luzzatu collection. But he was an impoverished man. His last penny was pen books. So finally he had to sell his collection. He had a marvelous collection. And the Alliance Israélite in France, that had money, bought his collection for their archives. So it became their ownership. In this hoard, that's what I call it, I suppose, in this piles of all these things, I found the Alliance Israélite collection of the Luzzatu collection. These are priceless books, priceless. They're incunabula, priceless. So there it was returned where it was possible. We found the Yivo, part of the Yivo library. Part of the Yivo library was returned to New York years later, but it was returned. Wherever no ownership, it was distributed among libraries in the United States. Some, the JTS got some, the Library of Congress got some, the Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati and New York got some. The Sifrei Torah were also distributed to various congregations. That's all I can tell you. That's all I know.
In our earlier conversation, you also mentioned that when the war ended, you were instrumental in arranging for some Frankfurt citizens to return home, and I'd like you to tell me about that as well.
You know, I forgot their name. I'm ashamed of myself. Forgotten. I have to call someone.
But just tell me briefly.
I'll tell you what happened. One of the young boys in our unit, he was an MP. He worked as an MP. But he was a Jewish boy from Berlin. And he came to me in Frankfurt. That happened in Frankfurt. Look, I know that you will eventually get to Berlin. I don't know what will happen to me. Because he knew what I was doing. When you come to Berlin, see if you can find any of my relatives. And he gave me a list. So I came to Berlin. I began to look around. And I found he wanted to find an uncle. I didn't find the uncle. But I found a man and wife who were distant cousins. They somehow remained alive in Berlin. He was a very sick man. He had a very bad ulcer and needed special food. So when I found him and located him, I began to try to get special food for him as much as I could from our own commissary. And what I couldn't, I wrote to Celia, and at that time they used Nestle chocolate. So she used to airmail Nestle chocolate to me, and I'd give it to him. Then one day, when I was already getting ready to go home, I wanted to say goodbye to them. I didn't want to leave without trace. So I went there. By this time they had some living quarters again. And I came to them to say goodbye to them. And they wanted to give me a pair of candlesticks, Sabbath candlesticks. Very beautiful, Polish. I recognized they were Polish made. And I refused to take them. I said, no, you don't take them. There'll be Jewish. He said, no, there'll be no Jewish life in Germany, so you have them. I say, no, it's not true, because as a matter of fact, I just found a rabbi in Wiesbaden to establish the community there, which I really did. So he said, no, we want you to have it. Well, I refused to take them. But they knew where I was working. And the next day when I came into the office, I found these two candlesticks. So of course I took them. I couldn't do any more. I packed them up and mailed them home. And I kept in touch with them when I came back. And finally they came to the United States. They came to the United States. He became a sexton, a shamash, in a synagogue in Hartford, Connecticut. And we used to see each other occasionally, because I had a former student who was a rabbi in Hartford. I would go to see him, and they would come to see me. But I forgot their name now. I'm terribly sorry. Okay. But I kept in touch with them. And the candlesticks are with me. They insisted that I keep them, and for which I am very grateful.
We're going to stop here to change tape.
Yes.
We continue with tape 2 with Mr. Abraham Aaroni. Mr. Aaroni, you were discussing the work that you did with the books and artifacts that you found, and you had just told a story of this couple whom you had helped. Please continue about your work after the war, and what was the end of this project for you? When did you finish?
Let's see. I continued with this work until about November 15th, 1945. And then I just wanted to go home. I was tired, and I really felt that it requires specialists. It required a good bibliographer. It required good librarians, good archivists, because there was so much and it was so varied that it couldn't be left to a person who cannot really do it justice. And I know that it continued later on with some experienced librarians and archivists, and certain treasures were returned to the owners wherever ownership was established, properly established and correctly established, and others were distributed to various libraries and institutions in various countries. Certainly the YIVO books, wherever possible, were returned to YIVO in New York. The Rosentaliana, I was told, was returned to Amsterdam. The Alliance Israélite collection was returned to the Alliance Israélite in France, and so on and so on. I remember there was talk something about the Breslau, the Breslau Rabbiner Institute, whose library we found there, or part of it, what to do with it, because Breslau became Bratslav, and it became part of the communist part of Germany. And I don't know what happened to that and what they decided. That's not, I don't know, but probably the people who were in charge, Rifkind may have known, or others, I don't know. And now,
did you have any contact with Holocaust survivors, with concentration camp survivors? Did you come across anybody who could tell you about what happened there?
No, not while I was in Germany. I only remember that, well, I know two things. One is that because Frankfurt had such a large Jewish community, we felt that as the people of the council, Colonel Knappen and others and I, felt that some of the Jews may have been saved, rescued somewhere. And we managed to get together. I don't know exactly how it was done, because I think mostly it was done with Colonel Knappen, but I know I did it. It was done, and I know the result of it. We sent off some trucks, managed to get trucks to send them off to Theresienstadt. And there were some Frankfurt Jews among the living, and they were brought back to Frankfurt, among them a rabbi, whose name was either Neustadt or Naiman, I don't remember. I only remember that he came back and that I went to see him and introduced myself, and that he had a volume of Bialik, the small sort of pocket volume of Bialik's poetry, and he said that it kept him alive, and it kept him sane while he was there. Actually, that was about the only thing we had. And the other, which was really not exactly direct contact, we heard that some Jews had returned to Wiesbaden. And because they had returned, we did go back there. I remember Captain Bookman and I went back there, and we found that the synagogue was still usable, and it was. And then we located a man with a rabbinical, who said he had a rabbinical degree, and he said he would take care of the synagogue and the community. There were some returned at that time, which was probably, let me see if I can remember when it was. Must have been in September of 1945, either August or September of 1945. I was told that there were about enough for a minyan, about 10, 12 Jews that had returned. And so the synagogue was revived, and some sort of Jewish community life was revived in that community in Wiesbaden. But that is the only one that I am aware of. In Berlin, as far as I know, by the time I left in November, there was no sign of Jewish life.
What was it like for you in Wiesbaden to see the reestablishment of a Jewish community after the annihilation?
Well, it's hard for me to say because I wasn't there.
Oh.
As a soldier, I just couldn't just get into a car and go there. It wasn't my job. My job was to try to reestablish it and leave it there. I suppose if I had made a special effort, I suppose I could have done it. And now I am sorry that I didn't do it, but I did not do it. But I know it was done. So that in itself makes me happy. And it makes me also quite happy the fact that the the United States Army realized the importance of reestablishing some sort of Jewish life, Jewish community life, and that they even. I know that Colonel Knappen wanted to get me a Bronze Star for my help with that, and he was turned down. But at least the Army wrote on my official discharge some sort of commendation for reestablishing Jewish community life in the United States sector, because I had nothing to do with the English sector or with the British, or with the, that's right, with the British sector or the Russian sector. I had nothing to do with it.
What was your impression of what had happened at the end of the war when people did start to trickle back? Did you have enough contact to have any feeling of the enormity of what had happened?
Yes, I think I did. I'm an art lover. And as soon as there was some semblance of artistic life in Berlin while I was there, I tried to find it. And I found one gallery with a certain young German woman, Ilse Vogel, V-O-G-E-L, who later came to the United States, got married. She was an artist herself and a writer, wrote children's books. And I found from our intelligence service that while she was pro-Allies, not that she has done anything, but she certainly was not a Nazi. And she told me of her suffering during the war, of the famine, and the general
Was she Jewish?
appeal. She was not Jewish. She was not Jewish. She said she would have tried to help Jews, but it was almost impossible for her to do anything. At least that's what she said. Whether it really was possible or not, I don't know. But she was not officially a Berliner. She was born somewhere, I forget where, in Germany, and was alone there, not with parents. A lonely woman. She was not married at the time. I think she was quite young when I met her, probably in her 30s or something like that. That was my contact with her. Otherwise, I had very little contact with the people, except with the truckers when they left to Theresienstadt, and when they came back, I was there to thank them for doing it, and that's about all. Because really, it was not my work to do that sort of thing, and as I say, in Berlin, the only two Jews that I found were this couple, whose name I forget, and who later came to this country, to the United States. And in Frankfurt, I did speak to the rabbi who came back, and he told me of the number of the few others came. And that's about all, I think.
Okay. When were you discharged and when did you return home?
I was discharged on November 23rd. November 23rd, 1945, and I came home, I think the same evening. I believe so. I took the train and went directly home, and the following Monday I went to work, went back.
You had been married before the war. How did your experiences affect your marriage and how that separation?
It was very hard, very, very difficult. I think Celia she still has the whole batch of email that she received from me. And I know that I have the whole batch of letters she wrote me. I wrote her every day. Fortunately, I was able to do it. I was not at the battlefront, never was. So I was able to do it. No matter how short it was, it may have been only 2, 3, 4 lines, but I was able to do it and write it. I always wrote it in Hebrew, and I did it purposely, because you had to signify on the envelope what language it was, because very frequently they censored the mail, and they wanted to know. And I wanted to have Hebrew place in it, and let some Hebrew guy have the pleasure of reading good Hebrew, because my Hebrew is good. So I know that, but it was very difficult. Also, it was more difficult for Celia than for me. I had a job to do. She worked, that's true, but she was lonely. And she is not the kind of woman who can go into a restaurant by herself. Not the type of woman who can go into a movie by herself. She's just not that person. I don't say it's bad or good, but I tried to convince her to act differently. I haven't succeeded in 66 years of marriage. So it was extremely difficult for her. Nevertheless, not only did she write regularly, but she sent me food regularly. I'm still amazed, absolutely amazed. She used to send me fresh apples, and they came because we didn't have any fresh fruit, and she knows how much I live on fresh fruit. And she sent me pickled lox, and we used to have some people in my unit, 2, 3 people together. That was a holiday. when the packages came, and they came quite frequently. And I must tell one crazy story. The first package that she mailed, I never received, and I couldn't understand why I haven't received it. It came 2 months after I came back to the United States. But it finally found me, So that was what it was like. It was very, very hard on her, extremely hard on her.
Did you have any children?
No.
Okay. So you said you went back to work the next Monday morning
The
teaching?
next Monday morning teaching at Thomas Jefferson High School.
Okay, and how long did your teaching career continue?
At Thomas Jefferson, I was in Thomas Jefferson High School for 18 years. And then again, teaching French and Hebrew at Jamaica High School for 15 years. No, about 12 years. And then at the same time at the New School for Social Research, special courses and Hebrew. Had interesting experiences there too.
Okay. Do you think that your experiences in World War II changed you or affected the rest of your life?
That's a very good question. Perhaps changed me only in one way. As a Jew and as a person well read in Hebrew literature in the original languages, Hebrew, Yiddish, Aramaic, I always felt the great unity of the Jewish people. But I think it became even stronger after my experiences in the war. Especially when I saw some of the, I had no direct contact with them, but I saw them in Berlin and Frankfurt. They came back little by little and I would see them. Especially when I saw some of the people who came back from the concentration camps alive and what they looked like and what they had to live through. I didn't talk to them directly, I don't know. But I knew from reading and from hearing. I felt a tighter my tighter belonging to this group and my feeling that it's a sort of miraculous thing, I don't know, for us to exist alive and so on. Just as I am still amazed how my own family, 7 children and my mother, lived through the First World War in Ukraine, managed to come to the United States, whole, healthy, 7 children and a lone woman, and managed to have a good life in this country, settled. My sisters were settled. I am. My 2 brothers who are still alive are all right. My one sister who is still alive, she's 95. She's still all right. Still has a memory. For all these, I am grateful no end. And I consider it miraculous. Just as I consider learning of a language miraculous, or language itself miraculous. I feel that way. And so, generally speaking, I'm a quite well-adjusted human being, even at my age.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is a one-volume Bible given to me by two of my colleagues the day I was leaving for the army. The two colleagues are Rabbi Lewitis and Eddie Horowitz.
Can you just describe the inscription?
The inscription says, to our dear friend Avraham Aaroni, and on the day of his mobilization to the United States Army, Tzetcha l'shalom uvoacha l'shalom. May your leaving be in peace, and may your coming back be in peace. This is the castle in Hungen, near Gießen, which was the main office of the Institut zur Erforschung der Judenfrage of Rosenberg. And this was their office in which there were some books, but this picture was an official picture by the Signal Corps of the United States, and probably, I think it was taken in May 1945. This is the brick factory in Hungen, near Gießen, which contained 39 carloads of all sorts of Judaica, books, prayer shawls, tefillin, phylacteries, sifrei Torah, scrolls of the Torah, various religious articles, personal photographs, personal letters, phonograph records, particularly liturgic music, a lot of liturgic music. And it was huge. It doesn't look huge here, but it was huge. If I can tell you, it took us 39 carloads to shift it back from Hungen to Offenbach am Main. Here are some of the things that we found inside that brick factory. These are tefillin, just thrown on top of each other, which are phylacteries, which the law-abiding or observant Jew puts one on his head and one on his left arm during prayer service on weekdays. And this picture also was taken by the Signal Corps of the United States, probably in May 1945. This also is a picture taken by the same group, by the Signal Corps of the United States, and this shows a prayer shawl, a talit, and they were just bunched up there in a container on top of each other. Again, it was inside this brick factory, and taken at the same time in May 1945. This too is inside the brick factory, and this looks like a case. I remember what it looked like, filled with the religious relics. I see there is a spice box. I see a little menorah, a little candelabra for Hanukkah, and various other such items. I see a pointer, a Torah, not one. I see 3 or 4 Torah pointers